Hello and welcome to Public Speaking Lesson 2, Introduction to Story Structure, the rules of how to put together a classic narrative. You might remember last lesson we spoke about meaning and using Maslow's triangle as a ladder for students to self-actualize through creative processes. Today we're going to talk about stories and story structure. And we're going to remember that public speaking is an audience-focused presentation. It means that it's centered on the listener experience. There are several types of narrative types. That's how the story is told. And one of them is about the story. It's about the narrative. It's about the journey that characters go on. That's called a story-driven narrative. The other is a premise.
כן, אני בדיוק באמצע השתלמות כרגע בזום, אתה בדרך לפה או שאתה לא יודע מה לעשות?
Thank you. I'm gonna, Vered, would you please mute yourself? Thank you very much. All right, so a premise-driven narrative is a narrative about a topic or idea. If you've ever seen a pitch of a business idea, like an elevator pitch, which is a 2-minute speech about an idea that you give to somebody in the length of time you're in an elevator. It could be about a amplifier for your cell phone. Hey, this device will make your cell phone louder. Do you want to hear about the idea that your cell phone should be louder? And that's the premise-driven narrative. And a story-driven narrative is a single story from beginning to end where the speaker relives the experience with a moral or logic at the end. So when we heard about, and the moral of the story is that everybody is beautiful on the inside, is a moral type of phrase. It's about a single story. Sometimes a single story might weave multiple narratives together, and that can distract the audience, or it can enhance the story being told. Usually a story starts with the beginning, and it has a middle, and then a climax at the end that forces the conclusion to be an emotionally ending. And there's a lot of sensory involved. Like you close your eyes and you imagine that you're on the journey that the characters are experiencing. Premise-driven narrative builds up logical elements step by step. It's a formula that proves the argument. It's a story that says, because if you use this product, your life will be better. It'll be better because you will save the earth. It'll be better because you'll be healthier. It'll be better because you'll be more attractive. So those are ways that a logical argument would be proven. Like, this product is so good that it makes your life better. How does it make your life better? It makes your life better because it'll make you happier. It'll make you more successful. It'll make you more wealthy. And today we're going to focus on this story-driven narrative. And we're going to do that by introducing the monomyth. So the monomyth is a concept that came out from Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces. And that came out in 1949. Joseph Campbell looked at thousands of years of important myths from many different cultures around the world, and he combined them with a modern psychological approach. And what he found were fundamental storytelling patterns that transcend space and culture. So cultures in the middle of the Pacific Ocean would have similar elements to desert cultures or to woodland people's cultures, and he spent a lot of time outlining those. So we're familiar with that concept as the introduction, as one of multiple types of storytelling templates. So we're very familiar with the 5-point story template, which starts with an introduction that describes the situation in a neutral manner and provides some background context. A complication, a hook, something that draws the audience in and reveals why the world is flawed and has to change. Hidden opportunities is part B, And that's after something happened in the first act. The character is now out in the real world, or out in a different world, and has to, make some friends, grow, and overcome some, some things so that they can have their big final confrontation in part C, where there's a solution that resolves the situation. So if there's a big battle, it usually happens in part C, and there's a big conflict or a fight or an argument or a court case. And this is the solution that resolves the whole situation before the characters bring it all home, and they bring that important moral lesson back to their people or onward on the next part of their journey. So that was just one of numerous narrative structures. And here's another narrative structure. It's called situation, complication, resolution. The situation is we are on a boat, and the complication is the motor breaks down, and the resolution is that we all get out and we swim the boat to shore. Another situation could be we're all on Zoom and somebody's internet goes down, and that's the complication, and the resolution is they log in from a different device. Situation, complication, resolution. Here's another one. Frame the problem, share the solution, outline the benefits, and a call to action. So what's the problem? Frame the problem, share solutions, and outline the benefits. It's really good for a premise-driven narrative where you're trying to solve a problem, and sharing how the solution and benefits is a good way to get people to an action. It's a good way to motivate people to some calling of your choice. Another thing you can do is share alternatives. Share viewpoints on both sides of the issue, and then you can share your more enlightened view. So, there's of this issue, there's two sides. There's side A and side B, but I think side C is actually a better option. So that's one of the things where it says share alternatives. A very fun activity to do with this idea, which is alternatives, is an idea from debate called proposition opposition, where the proposition is for an issue and the opposition is against an issue. And this is a good one to do in a classroom where students can say how they feel about an issue and then have to tell the opposite point of view. So vaccines are an easy example. So I think vaccines are good because they protect people's lives, and I think everyone should be vaccinated because of this reason. That's the proposition. The opposition is these are really, dangerous chemicals that we're injecting into our bodies, and a lot of people don't get sick anyway. So a lot of people are getting poked for no reason and having side effects that are worse than disease. So that's the opposition. Proposition, opposition are a good drill to bring out alternatives. And a more enlightened view might be, well, if some people don't want to get vaccinated, maybe we should enforce them. But there are some people who really are at more risk, so they should be offered the vaccines first. So the two alternatives are everyone should have vaccines, no one should have vaccines, and the more enlightened approach would be we should vaccinate according to need. But that can work with any issue. This is another great classroom exercise, a demonstration where you reveal something cool by sharing its features and telling people where they can get one. So we call this, in other words, we call this show and tell. This is my phone. Excuse me. This is my phone. When I push this button, the screen changes colors. It has different slots that power can go into and sound can come out of. You can get one online or at the Apple store near you. Show and tell. This is a water bottle. I got this water bottle on my tour to America, and I keep this water bottle with me because everywhere I go, I can fill it up with water and take it with me. You can get a water bottle like this in America. Hopefully, I think I'm screen sharing, so I don't know if anybody saw that, but everybody knows what a water bottle is. Everybody knows what show and tell is. Great way to get people something to talk about, especially in a classroom setting where students have a chance to bring in an object that's meaningful to them, that can help them, that can help motivate them on their to overcome any confidence issues. When we're telling stories or sharing premises, we want to give information. We want to share facts and data, things that are true, numbers that support that, how the numbers are spread out, called statistics. What would happen if hypothetical situations, like what would happen if you're camping and your car dies and you're stuck in the woods? Wouldn't you want a pocket knife or an axe or a hatchet so that you can, start a fire or make shelter? Stimulate listeners to convince themselves. Stimulate listeners to convince themselves. Wouldn't you want a life jacket if you were going swimming? Wouldn't you want a flotation device if you were in the middle of the ocean so that you wouldn't sink? Think about that for a second. If you're on a boat and the boat has problems, wouldn't you feel better if you had a personal flotation device? So I'm trying to stimulate you to think of yourself on a boat and something going wrong, and now you're convincing yourself that the boat should float, and the boat should have emergency, floating stuff in case it sinks. You can also use quotes as a very powerful source of information, and they're a form of non-story proof. So a quote about from Martin Luther King Jr., for example, which is, that everyone should look past each other's skin color and look at the content of their soul. I don't think I gave that quote over properly, but there's a lot of quotes that we know, and I think I got the message right. So quotes are also a powerful form of non-story proof. So when you're telling your story, it needs to have a catalyst to adventure. Something needs to happen in the hero's world that shakes their view of reality, and oftentimes it threatens a fundamental need. So we're going to draw back to Maslow's triangle for a second and look at the bottom of it, which is the physiological needs, or the basic needs, which include food, water, warmth, rest, security, and safety. So something that would catalyze an adventure is a fire. Let's say that your house catches fire and you no longer have safety, security, or warmth. You have nowhere to rest. You have to do something to change the status quo. So that's a very good catalyst to an adventure. In the story I told about Frodo and the Ring, what catalyzed Frodo's adventure was the wise wizard telling Frodo that the ring he was given was actually a very dangerous weapon he had to get rid of. So there's many different triggers, and these are things that can motivate a character out of their comfort zone and onto an adventure and onto a story. And oftentimes, it's important to note that people will take extreme measures to survive and to protect loved ones. So maybe you're on a plane, the plane goes down in the Arctic, and this is the story of the crazy things you had to do to survive the Arctic. When we use the term hero, we don't necessarily need to think of like a crime-stopping superhero vigilante, but just the hero of the story, the person, the character that the narrative revolves around. And here's an example of an intentional hero. And this is a hero who sets off on a quest to achieve a specific goal. So if we remember the myth of Hercules, where Hercules, to prove himself worthy, had to overcome 12 dangerous missions that only he could resolve. So an intentional hero is a hero who sets off with intention of becoming who sets off with the intention of becoming of being able to achieve his goals. So in real life, getting a job, I'm going out to look for a job. My goal is to be hired, is a form of intentional hero. We have a reluctant hero, and that's someone forced against their will into a journey. And an example is a soldier who does not want to go to war, but is drafted anyway and doesn't have a choice. Of course, there are people who want to go out to war, and that's their intentional goal. A reluctant hero, it might be the middle of the night and cold outside, but a car breaks down and somebody needs help, and you go and you help them. Or maybe that's the accidental hero who falls into an unexpected journey where something goes wrong. And an example is when you go on a camping trip and you're attacked by a bear, but you save everybody from the bear by punching it right in the nose and yelling really loud. And even though you didn't intend to fight this bear, like you had to do it, and now you're an accidental hero. And that's a character who falls into an unexpected journey. Oftentimes, in the beginning of a story, the characters will refuse the call, and this raises tension. And a refusal of the call can happen multiple times, and usually there should be increased discomfort every time the main character refuses to go on the adventure. The situation should get worse. Like if by not going to get a job, the main character is running lower and lower on money, and he got a job. There was a job offer, but he didn't want it, so he turned down the job offer even though he needed it. And as a result, he wasn't able to afford to pay his bills, and he got offered another job, but he still didn't want a job, so he had even less money, and then he couldn't pay for food. So that's an example of refusing the call and how it leads to increased discomfort. And oftentimes, the hero or main character is held back by threshold guardians and friends who cast out. Like the story of Mulan, a Chinese princess who wanted to go off and fight a war, but it's not accepted in the culture that she was from, that girls should do this. So her parents were the threshold guardians wanting to keep her safe. So they said, no, you can't go out to fight. That's not for you. Meeting with a mentor. And this is a good way to impart some wisdom onto the character. And you introduce a mentor who provides supplies or wisdoms or gifts to boost a hero's ability to continue into the unknown. The listener should feel the process is special and not the speaker. So sharing the wisdom of how to start a fire in the woods. So like I learned how to start a fire in the woods when I was in Boy Scouts, and the camp director came to give me and my group a special lesson on how to collect the right type of firewood, so that our little match could light the small leaves and twigs, and that those would catch a light and catch fire, and light larger kindling sticks, which are about the size of a finger on fire. And when we got enough kindling, enough of these little sticks on fire, we could put the fuel in. We could put in big logs. And so the mentor I met was the camp director, who provided this special wisdom, because he knew how to start a fire, and now I know how to start a fire, and now you know how to start a fire. And that's the message of how I shared a special process with the listener about the topic, which was, in this case, starting a fire in the woods. So there has to be something that gets the hero to commit to a journey. A hero must cross a threshold and enter an unfamiliar world. It should be dangerous, and there should be a point of no return or some self-sacrifice. So getting on a plane could be a threshold. Like, I'm gonna go and start my new life at university, and it's in a state 1,000 kilometers away. And here's my plane ticket, and here's the terminal for the gate. And I'm gonna leave my whole life behind me all of my friends and my parents as I take this next step in my studies by studying in a faraway university, in an unfamiliar city, in a new place where it's lonely. But once I get on the plane, like there's no turning back. Um, so growth. So growth is where our character is tested. These are generally not initially life-threatening situations, but maybe what does your character do when they're hungry for the first time? Do they have to get a job? Do they steal? Is there no work available? Do they run out of money? Um, and it's a place where they make new friends. Like, I was gonna steal this apple, but I met a friend and he gave me an apple instead, and now we're friends because he helped me in the middle of the story. And you can also, in the middle of the story, is a good time to meet minor villains. Like it could be the shopkeeper who kicks us out because we don't want to buy anything or he's suspicious of us, or it could be a police officer. It's generally a minor villain, a minor character who's not trying to kill the main character, but just gets in the way a little bit. And something needs to happen in the story that raises the stakes, that leads our character into a deeper and darker despair, a real low point where nothing can get worse. They've lost everything, and from here they can rebuild and they can find their strength and they can go and they can rise up again, and they can have a crisis, but not the climax. They can have no hope. It can be a physical or an emotional place. They can be locked up in jail. They can be brokenhearted, or they can, after an emergency when they're, on the side of the road, without any food. It can be, somebody who's afraid of clowns could see a clown at a party and just, lose it all together. Brush, or a giant spider, brush with the greatest fear to share with the listener how that character is feeling, so they can help relive the extremity of the circumstances. And that's where a character gets their first reward. They survived for dealing with the crisis. They're rewarded for surviving their first crisis. There's a little bit of a gift, and it's generally in proportion to how intense their crisis was. They get a little break. They might go to the doctor's office. It might be a hot meal. It's something that makes you feel warm and squishy on the inside, but not everything. It's not. This isn't gonna solve the whole story, or it would feel like it ends too soon. And this is where they prepare for their final battle. They they deal with the minor villains from the middle of the story. The shopkeeper who always kicked them out. Now the character goes and says, "I'm sick of you kicking me out. You're gonna hire me. I'm gonna work for you, and I'm gonna show you that you were wrong." It could be a betrayal of a friend. Like, I thought we were friends, and you took all my food. You were roommates, but you didn't pay your bills, and you left me with all the expenses, or some other surprise. And of course, our stories, we're familiar with these things. And this leads us in our narrative to the climax, the ultimate test, the real face-off, where the greatest fears are confronted and vanquished. Where this is a real life or death struggle. It's not the shopkeeper anymore. It's the mafia don on the end of the block who's been beating people up, and he's a real bad guy. The shopkeeper was just a victim of him anyway, and now you're friends because he hired you. And now you're dealing with the criminals who rob and extort you. And dealing with that, dealing with burglars attempting to break into your house at Home Alone, and coming face to face with them and vanquishing them. That's the climax. And of course, after the climax, after your enemies have been vanquished, there's a return to normal life with a renewed outlook on the world, with a message to share, with replenished energy. We survived the battle. Like we're getting healthy. Like there's no one else for us to fight. We're all friends again. Let's have a party. Let's share our innovative solutions back with our friends and family. Let's return home with treasure, with love, with wealth, with hope. And I think that's the at the end of the story, we want to offer hope to the listeners. Though in some cultures, they also, stories don't end with a happy ending. So in the Western narrative, oftentimes there's a hopeful ending at the end of the story, where other cultures favor a dark ending or a satirical ending or a despair ending, because some cultures might not believe that stories have happy endings. And so that's something that we can take into mind. But generally, when we're dealing with students, it's good for the message to be optimistic and to generate a feeling of hope that will inspire them to their studies. So storytelling lessons. When you're telling your story, you want a personal experience or an observation. It could be the greatest lesson ever learned, how and when it occurred. One lesson you could give yourself if you went back in time, where the journey is the reward. These are good classroom exercises. These you could have a multiple selection option for your students where they choose, to show and tell or to share a personal experience or to give one lesson. Can be a little bit open-ended. The important thing would be to get enough time per participant. Here's the thing that oftentimes movies get wrong, and that's they tell instead of show. The rule is show, don't tell. You want to relive and recreate your experience for the listener. You want authentic characters that behave like real people, that are complex for a riveting story. On stage, you can reenact gestures and postures like acting. And you can use a dialogue instead of narrate. The primary purpose of a dialogue is to reveal the true emotions and desires of characters. So dialogue, conversation should have a purpose, and it should reveal what's really going on. And good dialogue sounds like a real conversation that people, would have. Um, so all stories need a setting, a specific time and place, and that generates a strong sensory description or historical context. So if I tell you that, story happened a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or if I say once upon a time in the magical kingdom of blank, or if I say yesterday in Tel Aviv or at my house next week, here's a story about the future. So generating a strong sensory description in the kitchen, which smelled like grandma's chocolate chip cookies baking in the oven with the sweet aroma of cake and chocolate wafting in the air. Hopefully that would help you sense an emotional feeling that you can connect with about baking and take you deeper into the experience. And of course, there could be a historical context. In World War II, and that tells us a lot about what's going on. 2,000 years ago, that tells us a lot about what's going on. In the Stone Age, and all of these help generate expectations for where the story should go. So for our drill, in the second half of the class, we are going to be telling a story, which is going to tie into our teaching assignment. This story is going to follow the Once Upon a Time outline. This is also known as the Pixar Pitch. And it goes something like this. It's a tool for breaking down storytelling, so it contains all of the elements that we previously discussed. This is a good drill for every participant to have a minute or two. We were all able earlier in the lesson to tell a story about our favorite movie in about a minute, so these don't need to be longer than that. So I'm going to read out the outline and you'll understand how to fill it in. Once upon a time sets up the theme of the story, and every day is the context. What's a normal activity in this world? Until one day, the catalyst, the debate, the call to adventure occurs. And because of that, the B story starts. where the character is tested, where they have fun and they have games and they meet friends and they have like small consequences. And because of that, where we reach the midpoint and we're approaching the ordeal, that's the defining moment of the story. And because of that, the bad guys are closing in. It's getting dark. All is lost. The showdown is here. Until finally the thing happens and there's the crisis, there's the conflict that the character, has to get through, otherwise it's just the end. So we assume that the character survives the ordeal and has a lesson to learn because of it, and they get a reward. And since that day is the finale, it's the end of the story, it's the moral, it's the return message, and the moral of the story is, and that's the hopeful lesson that you want to share, or the lesson of despair, depending on the story. We've got a form where I'm gonna send that around to with the form has this outline in it, and this is just so it's available for everyone to reference in their classrooms. And I want to thank everyone for listening. And I want to stop sharing. Stop sharing. Yes. How do I stop recording?